got an upcoming lesson for 4th grade called Strange New Planet. This goes along with their solar system unit to kind of help the kids understand the different ways we study different things in outer space. I launched the lesson by just kind of having a really quick discussion, like no more than 5 minutes, talking about ways we understand other planetary bodies, other things out there in space. And usually, definitely the kids know about telescopes. Sometimes they know about things like the Hubble. Then in Science Lab, they have talked about the Mars landers, because we're getting ready to do our Mars lander BBOT lesson. They know that there are landers. Sometimes they know about how we'll have probes that do flybys, and sometimes they'll know about ones that will orbit planets. Then I really get into the meat of the lesson. I tell the students that we have new information about a new planet, and I invite them to join their mission teams by giving them their little booklets, and I ask them that they can come up with the name of their team, but then they also list the other people who are in their team. And we start by first making an observation. I point to my card and ask the kids to tell me what they see when they look up at the planet. I'm like, it's right there, don't you see it? Well, of course, all they can see is my star-covered fabric. And I remind them that this is a lot like, we may have planets out there that we're looking at, but we can't see them just with our naked eye. We might need a device. So then I give them their observation tool. This is a toilet paper tube covered with some cellophane from a goodie bag. This year I got like an opalescent kind of bubble colored one just because I thought that might be interesting. I have cut the bags into 4 pieces so that I can get 4 little cellophane pieces out of each. And then I just rubber band it on. And I tell them, all right, everyone needs to get their viewers ready. And they need to cover one eye and use their viewer. And once everyone has their viewers up to their eye, then I uncover the planet. And I tell them they only get limited time, so they better make their observations. After 20, 30 seconds have passed, then I cover it back up. I'm like, all right, stay time, no more observations. They complain because, of course, through the cellophane, things are obscured. The colors aren't right, it doesn't seem to be in focus. So then I invite them to leave the planet and use a space telescope, because once we use a telescope in space, we no longer get interference from Earth's atmosphere. So then the students take the cellophane, and I tell them you just have to pull it off. You don't even need to undo the rubber bands. I collect those so that I can reuse them for another class. And then we put our viewers back up again, where we have it over one eye, and we cover the other, and I uncover the planet one more time. Kids aren't allowed to get any closer. They have to take their location in the classroom planet, and that's it. They get a couple of seconds to make some observations. The very first page in the book has places for the students to draw what they thought they saw through the telescope observations and describe. And then they're asked, based on their observations, I asked them to think about any questions they might have if they could get even closer. Because we're getting ready to have a flyby, so they need to think about what questions they might have for when they get closer. So we go through in this way, where I cover it back up, and then the students are allowed to, as they're recording, I invite teams, and they can make a flyby. They're not allowed to get any closer than like maybe 2-3 feet away from the planet, and I only have one side of it exposed. They're not allowed to go around, because that would be an orbit. So they do a flyby, and then they go back and they draw, and they record their observations, and they record any questions for when they have time to do an orbit. Now, by the time we start doing flybys, because I don't want kids to have more than their given time to observe the planet, in the classroom I do the telescope observations, but then usually I move it out into the hallway, so as they're making their flyby, like, they can only get into the classroom doorway and they got to keep moving because you can't stop in a flyby. So once we get to the orbit, then it's out in the hall, and the classes have an opportunity the students in their teams walk around, they orbit the planet twice. And again, not allowing them to get really any closer to the planet, and they have to keep their viewer up to their eye. And then after they do their observations and their descriptions and they write any additional questions, they need to start planning, because after they've done their orbits, they get to plan where they would like to land. Now the landing, I ask them to draw a sketch of the area, so they have to decide as a team where they want to go. And I put a toothpick in the area that they show me, what I can tell from what they say and their drawings. So this encourages them to give good descriptions and details in their drawings. I put a toothpick, and then when they're allowed to land, they need to, oh, I'm destroying my poor planet. When they do their landing, I have toothpicks that are colored according to their team's color, and they have to keep their observing tool on the toothpicks that's sticking up. I remind them not to go all the way down to the planet with their viewer, because then they'll lose all the light, but they have to have their viewer touching the toothpick, because then of course once we land on the planet, we can't see the whole thing, we can only see a small area. So just to encourage them to start thinking about the limited, as we get closer, we do get limited amounts of information, but maybe more detail. So after we've done all of that and all the teams have had a chance to land on their site, they record their observations, and if we have time, and it kind of depends on the classes, or I give this as like a morning work for the next day for their teachers to give, or homework, I've got a chart where they can record the types of information they get from telescopes, the advantages to using a telescope, and the disadvantages. And also, of course, of the flyby, the orbiter, and then either a lander or a rover, because sometimes the kids will know that, well, sometimes we land, but sometimes we move. But for our landers, I don't care if they move around the toothpick, but they have to keep their tube attached to the toothpick at all times. So that is our Strange New Planet 4th grade STEAM lesson.
I have drastically sped up the video for this because it takes me probably about 15 minutes to make one of these planets. Now, the main structure of the planet is a styrofoam sphere. I either bought it at Walmart or bought it on Amazon. It would be whatever you would buy if you were going to make a solar system model. Now, I do use clay that's the non-drying kind of clay that I use for the main color on the planet and to build different landforms. It's kind of my base. And then I do use 2 colors each time I make a planet, because I have the 2 spheres, and then I just switch out one of the I just switch out part of it. I switch out one of the colors to make a 3rd planet, and then switch out another color, because I don't want the kids in different classes telling the other kids what they saw on theirs, because I have different landforms and features on these planets on different sides. So I start with the clay, and then I start adding little smaller features. These are those like tabletop sprinkles that you would put. They're kind of spiral, but you could really use whatever you wanted. And then just kind of squish it into the clay to embed it there. And sometimes I add some texture with different mountains and valleys or other things. Now here in a moment I'm going to use some clay to help me attach a Mancala bead, one of those glass beads that would either be a vase filler or would be a Mancala bead. I like to put some of the clear ones on there a lot of the time, because then it looks like a body of water to the kids, and it helps if you kind of build up a little clay around it. But I don't put the same thing on all the sides of the planet, so that something will be revealed when they get closer. Sometimes I do also put things like plastic bugs, because then I say the kids can study the life form. Here I'm using a star-shaped bead to add some texture, some design into that green landform. I have also used other hard structures that have a texture to just kind of add different things. I just kind of experiment and try to do something different with each planet again so that the kids don't tell each other what they'll expect. And I do recommend placing it on something like I've got it on that glass jar, just so that it doesn't roll everywhere. I do like to use pipe cleaners occasionally to kind of make almost like sunspot bursts coming out of the planet. The kids often see it like it's a ring of the planet, but I just kind of, attach at least two of the ends into the clay. Or, sometimes I do stuff in the middle and I try to have different colors that are on different sides. Now, I do like to use cotton balls kind of unwound to make clouds, and then they have the added benefit of also being a place where I can put some type of scent that the kids maybe won't pick up when they're just doing a flyby or an orbit, but as they land and get close, they may notice something like the mint extract that I'm using on this one. I have also used lemon extract to some effect. The garlic powder didn't, the kids really didn't notice that. And sometimes I put stinky, like icebreakers gum on there because that will have a scent, and then it just becomes a new geographic feature. So that's how to make a strange new planet.